I'm a 23-year-old man in Florida. I'm fairly introverted. Hardly ever get out of the house. This encounter happened a few months ago. It was about 12 a.m. and I was getting a bit stir crazy. I needed to get out and just chill with someone, so I texted a special lady friend of mine. We made plans to do our normal routine of hanging out at this nice, secluded park. I went and picked her up. We drove to our spot and spent a couple of hours just chatting about everything. Then she got hungry, so we decided to hop in the car and drive down the road a bit to McDonald's. Hooray for 24/7 fast food. This is where things started getting weird. We arrived at McDonald's and went inside instead of the drive-thru. She ordered her food while I went to the restroom to wash my hands. I really wish I hadn't gone to the restroom that night. As soon as I walked into the restroom, I saw this guy standing at one of those heat dryer things. Alright, not too weird. But then I noticed that he was kind of hunched over and wasn't moving. Whatever, I ignored him. I washed my hands and then realized that he's standing at the only dryer in the place. The damn paper towels are also empty, so I awkwardly tried to ask the guy if he was done using the dryer. He didn't respond. Thoroughly creeped out, I just walk out and dry my hands on my shirt. I get out of the restroom and find my friend and we sit down at a table to eat. Maybe 20 minutes go by and we're headed back out to the car to go back to our spot. Well, my friend has to use the restroom, so I figure I might as well also. I mean, surely that guy has to be gone by now, right? Wrong. That guy is still standing at the dryer, mumbling something to himself. I go into a stall and take a leak, and I can hear him hitting the button in the dryer, over and over again. I wash my hands again, and don't even attempt to get the dryer. But then the guy moves as I'm just trying to walk past. He steps back, right in my path, and just looks at me. I notice he's around my age. He just stares at me and says, "Excuse me." Okay. I put my head down quickly, saying, "Pardon me," and rush around to get out of the bathroom. 30 seconds later, as I'm waiting for my friend to get out of the ladies' restroom, the guy walks out. He just sits down at a table near me and is just staring straight at me. My friend walks out and notices the creep just eyeballing me. She jokingly asks, "Make a new friend in there?" I just shake my head and look at her and try to lead her out to the car without making it obvious. I'm ready to run from that guy. Then he does the weirdest thing. He just starts cackling, like a madman. I mean straight up Joker laugh. I'm thinking to myself, aw, shit. Crazy druggy dude is gonna do something bad. Then he just stops suddenly, looks down at my feet and says, "Nice shoes, Osiris." Osiris is a brand of shoe, by the way. I manage to mutter, thanks, and quickly walk away out to the car. As my friend and I are getting into the car, we notice the guy staring at me from inside the McDonald's, just straight eyeballing me, death stare. Then he stands up and starts booking it towards us. He wasn't running, but he was like speed walking. He bursts through both doors of McDonald's and starts coming right at us. Now he looks angry. I pulled out of the parking lot so fast. It's a damn good thing the roads were empty. My friend and I went back to our spot and hung out some more. Every car that we saw in the distance, I kept freaking out, expecting it to be that weird guy following us. My friend just teased me about how it made her entire night. And still teasing me about it to this day, about how I made friends with a creeper in the bathroom, who liked my shoes.
Number 2.
I was living in a low-income housing apartment in Minnesota, and at the time my mom and I simply couldn't afford to actually have an internet provider. This meant I leached off of the people in my building who had an unprotected wireless connection. Whenever their internet connections would go out, I would be forced to walk down to McDonald's in order to use the free Wi-Fi there. This had become a pretty common thing for me. On one of those internet droughts, I was standing about in the lobby of my apartment, about to leave, when the guy who lived next door to me, an older guy named Joe, stops me before I go. He tells me that him and one of the neighbors were going to McDonald's for coffee, and that he'd buy me one if I went along. I figured why not. I didn't really know much about Joe, since I mostly kept to myself. Let me explain Joe. He's a hunchback with a beer gut, and his ZZ Top Esky beard was probably full of food crumbs that I could only assume was from a McBiscuit, but he seemed like a nice enough guy, so I went along. After a ride in his rickety truck through the Minnesota winter, I was happy to reach McDonald's. Ah, free Wi-Fi at last, and if Joe held up to his word, a free McCoffee as well. I sit down and fire up the laptop to soak in all that free Wi-Fi. Soon after, Joe comes back with our McCoffees and says, as he sits down, he starts asking me in a raspy voice, "So boy, ever heard of God's DNA?" I look up from the Windows loading screen and ask, what? I was totally baffled and thinking, great, stuck with another missionary. Damn it. He goes on to inform me that God's DNA is the molecules that hold the universe together, not to mention it's what makes men genetically superior to women. I sure as shit didn't learn that in physics class, so I blew him off. When I got the chance, quietly ducked into another booth to browse internet in peace. He didn't seem to notice because afterwards a barrage of freaky bearded lumberjack dudes would come in and out of the McDonald's and talk to him for like 15 minutes at a time. I can only assume they were talking about God's DNA because I did my best to not pay any attention. But Joe and his gang of weirdos still gave me a very creeped out feeling. I could tell they kept looking over to stare at me when they thought I wasn't looking. Having had enough weirdness for that night, I decided to duck out when he hobbled off to the bathroom. I assume only to take an epic shit. I took my chance, folded up the laptop, and headed out to the brave, the cold, Minnesota winter. On the way back home, I reckon that having to put up with the elements was still preferable to being around a bunch of weird-looking lumberjack creeps. I was almost back to the apartment when I heard the truck slowly rolling up and crunching the snow. I looked over my shoulder and I saw Joe in his truck. Next to him was another one of those fucking bearded bums from McDonald's. I waved to them, but I got no response. Whatever, I thought. I went home for the night after the creepiness. But then, after that, every night after that, every time I went back to McDonald's, either Joe or one of his weirdo lumberjack buddies would be there. I could partially feel them leering at me. They always appeared grungy and dirty. Forced to go to McDonald's, just to use the internet, I tried avoiding them as much as possible. It almost seemed as if they knew ahead of time that I was going to be there. Considering they all had a relationship with Joe, I think it is very likely that they actually did. Eventually, someone broke into Joe's apartment and stole his bicycle, prompting him to move elsewhere. I learned a couple things about Joe after he left the apartment, such as he traded most of his food stamps every month for drugs, and that he regularly told women in our apartment that he wanted to leave his body in spirit and ravish them in their sleep, whatever that meant. After this point, I saw McDonald's stalkers only sparingly, and then never again. Neighbor Joe and other assorted McDonald's stalkers, let's not meet again.
Number 3.
So about 4 to 5 years ago, when I was 15, 16 years old, my mom took me to McDonald's for lunch. We went inside of the restaurant, and my mom immediately headed to the bathroom. When I headed around the corner to get in line, I noticed something weird was going on. There was a man at the counter acting super strange, and lots of people in line were backing away from him and gathering into a little crowd further back. The man started shouting loudly at the woman behind the register and banging his fist on the counter. He lifted up his shirt to expose himself to the lady, started yelling extremely vulgar things to her. This is where I stepped in, since no one else was intervening the situation. It was my time to shine. Being a young, punk-influenced teenager, I thought I was going to be the hero. I walked right up to the man and shouted something along the lines of, "You asshole, what the hell are you doing? Shut up and leave." He turns around and exposes his chest to me and yells gibberish to the top of his lungs. I then thought it would be a good idea to swing a fake punch at him to scare him. Bad idea. He immediately digs into his pockets and pulls out a huge knife. I didn't even know how. He was stashing that thing in there. He just holds it out in front of me and starts yelling some more. Everyone who was previously in line behind me scatters and starts yelling. At this point, lucky for me, my mom came out of the bathroom and noticed I was in some sort of trouble. She immediately grabbed me by the back of my shirt and dragged me out of the McDonald's yelling at me. I explained to her what had happened and she told me how stupid I was to try anything. And the man was probably mentally challenged. Someone came out of the restaurant, found me, and said they calmed the man down and discreetly called the police as to not set the man off again. We waited in that parking lot, and the police showed up shortly after. They detained the man as they were bringing him outside to a squad car. The man looked straight in my eyes, smiled and screamed, "I'll gut you next time. I swear I'll get you, pretty boy." So yeah, mentally challenged man from McDonald's, please, let's not meet ever again.
Number 4.
I have never really been one to attract crowds to me, or any kind, really. At the time I was 19 and working at McDonald's to help out with family bills and shopping and other things we have to deal with in order to live in a house with 6 people. But around closing hours I would notice someone show up and hang around the back of the place. He never ordered anything and that was fine by me, looking back at it now. I probably should have got someone like the manager to know about it, but I was honestly too shy and afraid to be yelled at for bothering him. Our manager was kind of an asshole, so no one really wanted his help with anything. But the guy would later start leaving when I did, often staring at the exit that I would take to leave, or my car, or just at me. It was creepy, and it only got worse as he got comfortable enough to start following me out to my car, hanging around the spot where I'd park, and I never stayed long enough to see who he was or what he was doing. Eventually, I quit, as he was getting closer to my passenger seat car door every day. I figured any longer and he'd actually get into my car with me. But this was when I was 19 and stupid, me now being 22. I honestly wish I called the cops on this stalking prick, who only stared at me. It was only me too, the other cashiers noticed he was there. But like I said, no one wanted to get the manager involved, seeing as he was kind of rude to everyone. And no one wanted to deal with the aftermath of him yelling at him to get out. But looking back, it was honestly would have been worth his angry attitude, even so. I think the guy would come back anyway. I've never seen this guy, but his cold eyes staring at me leaves a mark in my brain. So creepy guy in the corner booth of McDonald's, let's never meet.